Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Laura Prada from the Telesur studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. In Ecuador, the vice president has been accused of soliciting financial contribution during her term as an assembly member. Our correspondent in Quito, Denise Herrera, tells more.
Hello, yes, indeed. Ecuador's President Lenin Moreno just talked in a national TV chain. He talked about the situation that is facing the current Vice President of Ecuador, Maria Alejandra Vicuña, after she was accused of making illegal contributions to her assistance when she was a lawmaker in the National Assembly. President Lenin Moreno said there have been accusations against Vice President Maria Alejandra Vicuña. I cannot act as a judge. He said before that the Ecuadorian justice is the institution responsible to take action under these allegations. And he also said that he is trusting in the Ecuadorian justice. He also talked about the Ecuadorian border with Colombia. He said that a dialogue has begun regarding the province of Carchi. We understand the problems at the border and its economic vulnerability that is affected by the situation of Ecuador and Colombia. He said that his government is working now in democracy, and he is very grateful with his cabinet, and he is also very grateful that Ecuador now has a new investment in the country. Is the all information we have for now. Back to you at the studios.
Thank you, Denise. In Ecuador, the Ombudsman Office has spoken about the situation of former Vice President Jorge Glass. In light of Glass' health, they have urged the judiciary to decide on its position with regard to his medical condition. Glass has been on hunger strike for over a month, condemning the inhumane condition he's being held in, as well as what many call political persecution against him. In Chile, Sebastián Piñera's government and the public sector have reached an agreement after protests and negotiations on wage adjustment. Our correspondent, Tiare Valenzuela, has details.
This Wednesday, a negotiation was carried out between the public sector and the government. Workers demand better working conditions, job stability, and a wage adjustment. After 3 days of paralysis, workers finally managed to convince the government, obtaining a salary increase of 3.5% despite the 7% initially demanded by the sector. This negotiation comes to an end after the pressure exercised during 3 days, in which hospital, ministries, and public service have been paralyzed. This agreement was signed by the vast majority of the unions, except for 2 of them that will consolidate their members.
Now we move to Argentina, where social organizations are calling for massive demonstrations on Friday, the same day the G20 summit is set to start in Buenos Aires. The summit comes as Argentina suffers an economic crisis which has seen the value of the national currency plummet. Tens of thousands of security officials are also being deployed throughout Buenos Aires, effectively shutting down the city.
All social organizations in Argentina will take to the streets on Friday. We want to express our rejection of the G20, of Trump, of other imperialist leaders, of the agreement between President Macri's government and the International Monetary Fund.
Argentine people are the resistance, and we will continue to resist until we have the chance of giving a dignified life to every resident in our country.
A number of leaders have already arrived to Argentina for the summit, among them Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Following the murder of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi, Prince Mohammed has hoped to rebuild his reputation at the summit in Buenos Aires. But now a prosecutor in the Latin American country has agreed to make up a case against bin Salman for possible war crimes committed in Yemen, where the humanitarian situation is worsening. Still in Argentina, the People's Summit has kicked off with various social groups and political movements coming together in Buenos Aires. The summit aims to discuss an alternative agenda to the G20 summit. This will be done through lectures and workshops on many topics, including capitalism, LGBTQ rights, feminism, among many others. The organizers are also planning to protest in front of the country's Congress on Thursday, a day before the G20 summit begins. Now we make contact with our correspondent, Sabrina Ross, who is in Buenos Aires and will bring us more.
The G20 summit has attracted large-scale protests around the world. This Friday and Saturday, world leaders will meet in the city of Buenos Aires. On Tuesday, we witnessed the first massive rally organized by social and political movements. They're strongly criticizing IMF-imposed policies. Meanwhile, the People's Summit will take place in front of Congress. A number of meetings will also take place over the next few days while the summit is in session. These include forums led by the Continental ALBA Movement, the World Lawyers Network for Food Sovereignty, and the Continental Union.
Thank you, Sabrina. Time for a first break hearing from the South, but you can find us on Twitter as Telesur English and Laura P. Telesur.
The ruling world order has always subjugated the masses. But who are the actors behind every move? What are their real interests? We analyze every move on Critical Move. Weekdays, only on Telesur. Telesur brings you special interviews with social and political personalities. Monday, from Washington. Tuesday, from Mexico. Wednesday, from Caracas. Thursday, from Quito. Friday, from Havana. Analysis about our continent's reality. Weekdays, only on Telesur. With developing events being presented through analysis. Our coverage transcends borders. With renowned journalist Walter Martinez.
Salud amigos, tripulantes de nuestra querida, contaminada y única nave espacial.
Dossier. Weekdays. Only on Telesur.
Y ponga usted las cámaras, señor director.
back. Now we go to Mexico, where a group of about 100 migrants have been deported and are heading back to Honduras. The migrants have reportedly given up their asylum requests in the United States and now are on their way to their home country by plane. The Mexican Commissioner of International Migration Institute claims the migrants are leaving voluntarily. Mexico's government still says it will deport 500 migrants who tried to cross onto U.S. soil, and U.S. border troops fired tear gas at them on Saturday.
The President of the United States is angry right now. If he dies of a heart attack, we will pay for it. That is why I'm leaving. I don't want to be an accomplice to that debt. I left a 5-year-old boy in Honduras, and I'll be happy because I'll see him, hug him, and never separate from him.
As the migrant caravan grows, conditions in Tijuana shelters are starting to worsen. Many migrants are living in crowded conditions following their failed attempt at crossing the border on Sunday. Many were left shell-shocked and in fear for their lives. Crossing into the U.S. illegally has proven to be near impossible, so now the migrants have to consider staying in Mexico and wait for months as their asylum requests are processed, or turning back heading home. Over 2,300 migrant children are living in El Tornillo, emergency detention camp in the United States. The camp was opened last June by the U.S. government. It has capacity for 360 minors and is a temporary shelter. Currently, there are more than 2,000 young migrants detained, waiting to be reunited with their families. Their age range is from 13 to 17 and must come from Central America. Now to Peru, where a public prosecutor has issued an order to prevent the husband of the opposition leader Keiko Fujimori from leaving the country. Mark Vito, who's facing money laundering charges himself, isn't allowed to travel out of Peru for 3 years. His attorneys, however, are set to appeal the decision. More and more Cuban doctors are heading back to Cuba after the Cuban government retired from the More Doctors Medical Exchange program in response to offensive comments made by President-elect Jair Bolsonaro. Let's find out more on this report.
Every day since arriving Brazil, Dr. Yamirka Rodriguez leaves home at 5 a.m. and heads to the Jardim Varginha favela just outside Sao Paulo. Here, she treats patients at a communal health clinic. But today is different. As Cuba ended its medical exchange program with Brazil, Dr. Rodriguez must now say goodbye to her Brazilian co-workers.
She will leave a very important legacy here. She's a great person, somebody who has cared for a lot of patients. Many cried when they found out she would be leaving. I learned a lot from Yamirka.
Close to 2,000 municipalities were dependent on the care and expertise these Cuban doctors provide. This would greatly affect the quality of healthcare these communities can access. This, in a country where economic inequality has reached extreme levels. One of Dr. Rodriguez's patients embroidered her name on a gift so that she does not forget about her.
I had strange wounds on my body, and for 3 years I went to private doctors to find a cure. In one visit, she solved my problem. I thank God for putting her in my life.
WhatsApp messages from patients defy the meaning of the word saudade, a word that has no direct translation, but refers to a feeling of melancholy.
I have cried so much. Every time a colleague or a patient says to me, "Saudade de você," my heart tightens, and it's difficult to hold back the tears. I will take all of these people in my heart. Every moment I have lived here in Brazil will be impossible to forget, but I'm moving forward. I will face new challenges in Cuba, new goals. I will continue doing my job wherever I'm needed.
Just like Dr. Rodriguez, over 8,000 Cuban doctors have had their dream interrupted, a dream of helping those most in need through a program that provides much-needed aid in 67 different countries, inspired by the dream of Ernesto El Che Guevara.
Still in Brazil, where a Catholic priest has said the jailing of former President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva is part of a scheme by the current administration to induce fear to population. Pedrinho Guarechi added that this scheme also involves attempts at criminalizing social movements. The priest, who visited Lula on Monday, said they talked about injustices and oppression the PT members and minority communities are currently facing in Brazil. And the Brazilian Supreme Federal Court is set to analyze an appeal presented by the defense of the jailed former president in December. Lula da Silva's lawyers presented this appeal to ask for the invalidation of the legal process against him and for the freedom of the former president. They say this is due to the loss of impartiality of former Judge Sergio Moro, who sent Lula to prison and is now President-elect Jair Bolsonaro's justice minister. Lula da Silva has been in jail since April of this year. Now we go to Colombia, where thousands of students have marched to demand Iván Duque's government a real budget for public universities. Students carry out this mobilization despite the government's warnings not to accept protests as a mechanism of social pressure. Also, teachers and indigenous communities joined the demonstration to reject the policies of the government, which they say are against human rights.
We as students totally oppose the violent attacks by these state's repressive forces. We raise the people's voice to fight for our rights. These forces are violating our legitimate right, which is the popular organization, and march to express themselves.
Now we go to Cuba, where a high-tech industrial park is being constructed, aimed at covering high-technology electronics and consumer industry. Vice President Ramiro Valdez Menendez attended to the construction works that have just started by the Vietnamese company Biglacera. The industrial park will cover the needs of the internal market and also produce tools for exports.
This project is another evidence of the strategic nature of bilateral relations as it was ratified by the top leaders of both countries in the recent visit to Vietnam by the President Miguel Díaz-Canel, and the potential to expand economic and trade links.
Now let's take a second break hearing from the South. More news when we are back.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur. In a world infested by inequalities, abuse of power, and injustice, the American journalist Abby Martin covers the struggle for fundamental rights worldwide, deep into the search of files which uncover the empire's strategies through our screen and web platform in English. The Empire Files with Abby Martin. Tuesday, only on Telesur. The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transform the world today. Mondays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. The United States Senate has voted for a resolution to end the support of the U.S. military for the Saudi-led coalition's military offensive on Yemen. The resolution was passed by a vote of 63 to 37. This has reflected the bipartisan anger at President Trump's response to the humanitarian crisis in Yemen and the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi.
U.S. intervention in Yemen is unauthorized, unconstitutional, and immoral. And we cannot delay voting to end our involvement and our support of Saudi Arabia any further. If we do, we have ourselves to blame for our country's lost credibility on the world stage. And more importantly, our own consciences will bear the blame for the thousands of lives that will surely continue to be lost.
The Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko says his country is ready for a potential confrontation with Russia. Tensions between the two countries continue after Ukrainian military ship entered Russian maritime space. Similarly, the U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis has accused Russia of attempting to annex the Kerch Strait. On his part, Russian President Vladimir Putin says his country won't fall into provocations.
It is a sign of the planned provocation to take advantage of the situation and introduce martial law in the country. There is nothing in common with efforts to try to fix Russia-Ukraine relations. It's a game for Klein. It's a dirty game inside the country to suppress its political enemies.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says there is evidence that the Ukrainian incursion was planned.
We call our colleagues' attention to the documents revealed to the public after the Russian border military inspected the ships. These documents clearly show that this was a planned provocation aimed at achieving certain geopolitical purposes and solving Kiev's internal problems.
Georgia's presidential candidates have cast their votes in the second presidential round-off. The candidate backed by the ruling party, Salom Zurabishvili, wants a balance in the foreign policy between Moscow and the West, while opposition candidate Grigol Banchadze wants a stronger alliance with the Western powers. Citizens are hopeful the new president will bring a better future for the country.
Today, as in the first round, I have voted for Salome and I hope everything changes for the better. We will move to Europe, not to Russia. I have voted for improvement in the country, the happiness of our nation, and I hope that the difficulties we have gone through these years will change for the better.
Nigeria's president has urged soldiers not to give up the fight against armed jihadist Boko Haram on a visit to the key city of Maiduguri. Despite heavy losses, Muhammadu Buhari paid tribute to the army, who he says have helped secure the area. His visit comes a day before he holds talk with his regional allies on how to counter Boko Haram. There has been an increase in attacks on the military and civilians, leading to fear of insurgents.
The bottom line is to have personal security. You are only secure physically and materially as long as this country is secure. If for any reason this country is made insecure, you are the first to lose your security.
A former rebel leader in the Democratic Republic of Congo, accused of mass rape and crimes against humanity, has gone on trial in a military court. Entabo Checo and his rebels are accused of raping more than 300 women in 2010 in the east of the country. Checo, who founded the Induma Defense of Congo militia in 2009, is also accused of theft and looting, as well as recruiting children into his militia. Like this, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories on our website, telesurenglish.net, where you can find more news, opinion articles, and of course, special interviews. You can also join us on social media like Facebook and Instagram. Continue with Telesur, connecting the global south. Thank you for watching.